Hi folks, here with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining us. Audio, radio, no pictures. Listen to this essay as you're driving along in your car or truck or on public transport. Now, in this essay, I'd like to talk about the wider issue is employee evaluations of affirmative action hires. So as the amount of people who are hired under the affirmative action banner are increasing at all levels now, and there's still the employee evaluation system in place. If there's any sort of honesty or merit or integrity in the employee evaluation system, quite obviously, the over-promoted, underqualified affirmative action hires will get sometimes, maybe many times, will get negative reviews. Now, a negative review, employee performance review, can be taken a number of ways. You can look at it as to, well, this is what I need to improve on. So a bit like an examination. If you at school in the merit-based days that I remember, in Australia at least, if you did okay in this exam but not the other exam, then you knew that you needed to put more work into that other subject, more study, hit the books and all that sort of stuff. So in that sense, it was a reality check that, hey, you're doing all right with this, but you need to put more work into mathematics or whatever else. Now, this was an important way for teachers, the education system, but also for the student to say, well, I need to lift my game here and there and put more work here and there and that sort of thing. So it was a good thing. And employee evaluations, if they're done honestly, can also help an employee to where they need to put more work in to improve their performance and or maybe improve their attitude or whatever the case may be. So but the problem is that the assumption under employee evaluation is that you're hiring people who have meritoriously met the standard that's needed for the particular position that they hold. So on that basis, you're really evaluating somebody who's already met a certain baseline standard, and you're saying, well, this is how you can improve. You already can do your job, or most of it, or nearly all of it, but these are the areas you need to improve in. And you're being evaluated by somebody, a boss, who has done that job and has themselves met a meritorious standard. And has met it sufficiently where A, they got the job, and B, they got promoted, so they're qualified and better qualified than you to be able to pass judgment and make suggestions and hopefully make helpful suggestions. Now, I remember employee evaluations. Sometimes I didn't like them, but they when they would point out, the boss, within the performance evaluation would point out, well, you need to do a bit more work here, or let me make a suggestion. Instead of doing it this way, have you thought about doing it that way? And these type of things that may be reflected in not simply the employee evaluation, but the wider discussions that went on around that. So anyway, employee evaluations, they've got their role to fill, but they were conceived and developed at a time of merit. Now that merit has gone. No one ever would have conceived the affirmative action hiring of people who are completely unqualified, or who had degrees that they've never earned. The assumption was if you had the degree or the diploma or this or that you'd worked for it, and you'd met a baseline meritorious standard. All that's gone out the window now. So this has drastically changed the dynamic in the workplace, as you can probably imagine. So I'm looking at the lawsuits, a number of lawsuits, many lawsuits, in fact, that are around the Western world about supposed bad working conditions, hostile working environments, patriarchy, misogyny working environment, racist working environment, that's a favorite, neo-Nazi working environment, the list goes on. Now, all these are ideological sort of positions that they're taking. Can they point to an actual thing that is illegal? Well, no, they can't. So they create a sort of a wider collage of ideological sort of gender studies talking points. So, well, look, there you go. There was a joke here. There was a sideways glance there. There was a silence somewhere else. that equates to the sort of behavior that you would find in Nazi Germany. Therefore, it's the behavior of Hitler, and the lawsuits come out. Now, there was one lawsuit, and I was looking at the photographs of the people. Now, these people are supposedly kick-ass scientists, rocket scientists, engineers. These people. Now, you'd be, I don't know, hard pressed to sort of see that. But if you look at the photographs of the people, we're talking, I think it was 4 women and 1 man. The women were all tattoos, multicolored, or some of them had, not all of them did. Some of them had multicolored hair, multiple body piercing, and supposedly they've got degrees, triple A grade science degrees from Ivy League universities, and they've been hired for their alleged expertise. Now, it's pretty clear. Some of them have been doing the left-wing media circuit, complaining about how misogynist everything is and patriarchy and the like. But you listen to them, and they don't come across as very bright. One of them comes across as quite moronic, in fact. So anyway, you've got these 4 women who supposedly got, again, gilt-edged science and rocket science degrees from Ivy League universities, but I just can't see it. Maybe they did, but wow, it's they sound pretty ordinary to me. I've hired people in the past that seem smarter than them, but anyway, this is so these women, in my view at least, quite clearly have been affirmative action through high school into the university, affirmative action just simply to create some sort of ideological notion of equity. They've been affirmative action through university, and then they've been affirmative action hired to meet gender and race quotas and so on. Now, the company that's hired them was getting government grants for various research projects and so on. They seem to be doing quite worthwhile stuff. So I think it was prudent and sensible of any government, regardless of where you would find them in the world, to give assistance, whether it's through tax breaks or whatever, to these organisations that are doing this sort of work, rather than give tax breaks to Disney for spreading, black lesbian propaganda. Now, but in return, the government always wants something in return. Today, and for some years now, there are very substantial strings attached to any government investment. It used to be that you had to sort of justify a government handout by saying you're going to get results, or showing that there was a high likelihood you'd get results, such as a new invention or a new technology or something that would make the investment worthwhile. That's no longer the case. If it doesn't work out, nobody cares. The only attachment that come with it is you have to hire a certain amount of black lesbian, the proverbial black lesbian. You have to hire so many women. So it's all social engineering type strings attached today. So this organisation receiving government money was then obligated to hire a certain amount of affirmative action employees, people who weren't qualified. But as you get so many layers of affirmative action now, through senior high school, through university, and then job hiring, you've got these massive armies of people all over the business and certainly the government sector, that are in no way even minimally qualified to be doing the jobs that they're supposed to be doing, and they're so fucked up in the head with ideological fanaticism that they can't see the forest for the trees. Now, this is one of these cases. So I'm looking at these women that have been, and the gay guy, these women that have been hired as supposed scientists. Fuck. And you've got the tattoos and the body piercing, the angry sort of I'm being oppressed disposition. And why would you hire something like that? You're almost saying, hey, please come in and put a lawsuit. Now, these women then get their evaluation. They don't like their evaluation, saying, oh, well, the men are evaluated much more lightly than we are, which would not have been the case, by the way. We're being singled out and discriminated against just because we're women, or just because we're lesbian, or just because we're black, or just because we're gay, or something. So they're able to claim or assert and allege, without any proof, by the way, that they're being especially targeted And if they complain about it or become disruptive in the workplace, they get warned. They still continue to be disruptive. I'm a victim. You're oppressing me. I'm not going to do any work today. There's payback for you oppressing me. Well, and you're going to get fired. And which they were. So they then launched these lawsuits that say that they overheard a joke, or they, and they put together things that you look at and go, well, that's not illegal, but they're able to say that it was a work environment that was oppressive to women or minorities and so on. And now the media, which again shows that the lawyers that come forward to help them are NGO lawyers that are well connected and tied in with the media. So it's a very coordinated campaign. The lawyers very publicly making filings, the media covering it and gushing about, the evilness, Nazis everywhere, fucking Hitler. And so companies with a brand name that they don't want their brand being dragged, through the mud with all this nonsense and silly, frivolous lawsuits and lawfare lawsuits and this type of thing. So they sort of have a look. How much will it cost to make you guys go away? $1 million done. Here it is, and that's the sort of thing that's going on these days. Now there seems to be no shortage of lawyers that want to take these cases on, and who very suspiciously work for NGOs that are at the forefront of agitating in LGBT and gender type affirmative action programs. So it's no accident or mistake here. These people that are being employed here are already activists and primed through the activist system. They have access to the activist network, and so it's no problem for them to find the lawyers, the NGOs, and the media hustlers and the shakedown artists to push it along. Now, I've got but the issue here is you've got a lot of very unqualified people, over-promoted, unqualified people. Here's one woman saying, now she's sort of fresh out of college with her affirmative action degree, and she thinks she should be put as lead scientist on a project. Now that she wants to be the lead scientist over the top of men in their 40s who've been doing it for 20 years. There's nothing wrong with that in her view. She's entitled to that. I'm entitled to come in as a person who's done no work, built nothing, created nothing, achieved nothing. With my affirmative action bullshit degree, I'm entitled to come in and be the head lead engineer on this project. And if I'm denied that, or I'm not given that role, then it's discrimination by Hitler. And so, the lawsuits go. And if she gets an employee evaluation that she doesn't like, then she can claim that's discrimination. Now, I've got quite a lot of experience with, having, like in bigger companies, having been the VP and the EVP and all this sort of stuff, CEO and everything. They're not of huge companies. We're talking 500 or less employees here, but nonetheless, I've had long experience at fronting the board of directors, having to give monthly state of the nation type summaries of what's going on. Now, typically boards of directors, not always, but typically boards of directors come from the moneyed end of town. They've been born into money. They've inherited money. They've never had to worry about money. They've never had to exist in a world of reality. At least not in any financial world of reality. These are people that can drop millions without batting an eyelid. Anyway, they're on the board of directors. Now, typically boards of directors are, because it's a socially prestigious gig, and it's handed to people who are in the socially prestigious circles, moneyed circles, and so on. Usually old money, but sometimes newer money. But so these people have never had a job in their lives. They've never been for an interview, never had to think about money, and they're on a board of directors. So they're telling me, the guy who's worked his way up from the shop floor, what to do. Now, they're meant to confine themselves to sort of bigger picture strategy stuff, and give folks like me, the management sort of people, the benefit of their infinite wisdom. But it's not that way. It's like dealing with children. Again, they've never had a job. They've never done anything, achieved anything, produced anything, created anything. They've just inherited a fuckload of money, or they flip real estate and they fancy themselves as high-powered business people because they flip waterfront real estate at a profit. Anyway, this is the when the affirmative action thing was sort of kicking off in the earlier days. These guys were all on board. The board of directors were all right into it. They sort of loved it. They seemed to relish it as a way of demonstrating their we may be rich, but we care type credentials. They never could explain it to me why it was necessary, why it was good, or it was throwaway lines. And they often had wives who were active in charity causes, who were also picking up all this leftist nonsense. And they had daughters that were ambassadors for some sort of international NGO, and so these guys were being subjected to the buzzwords and the notions and the ideology, and they would bring this into the fucking board meetings. So they used to put a lot of pressure on me for, why aren't you hiring more black, proverbial black lesbians, all this sort of stuff. So now, say I've got an advert out for I don't know, whatever the role is, and I get 100 applications, 2 or 3 are women, which is how it was at the time. Now, so because I'm under some, they're in my, getting in my face all the time. I'm even getting calls sort of during between the monthly meetings. I'm even getting calls of, hey, Billy Bob, how's it going? You got any good quality women you want to hire? This sort of thing. So they weren't telling me directly and specifically saying, you will hire this woman. But they were suggesting, I've got a friend whose daughter wants to do this, and you felt obligated to sort of meet them and talk to them, and just to shut the guy up and keep sweet with him. But the pressure was sustained and constant. Again, not providing any reasons other than it should be so. They're not saying it's going to help the business or improve the business. It was just do it because it sounds good. So I'd hire some of these women, or even women that were in the company at the time. They'd put me under a bit of pressure to promote them and give them a sort of seat at the senior managerial table. Which so it also came down to, and that's where I'm going this week, I had to evaluate them, the performance evaluation. And we had 3 monthly evaluations in this organisation that had been there when I arrived. And but again, I have to reinforce, or need to reinforce, that the women, whether they were hired or in the company at the time, they weren't qualified to do the job. They hadn't worked their way up. That's number one. They hadn't achieved and accomplished and built and created. They had not done that. So they were being parachuted straight into a senior role that they had not earned. And this is material, if not fundamental, to understanding what happened subsequently. So when it comes to the evaluation, these women know that they've been over-promoted. They know that they're underqualified, and they're struggling to do the job. And with most of these women, you had to put someone else with them. So instead of one person doing the job, you needed 2. Or instead of one supervisor, you had to back them up with like a 2IC to support them, which is invariably going to be a man. So when it comes to evaluation time, it's a trade-off. So I was sort of approached, look, you're not doing a good job. You're not quite, I wouldn't phrase it like this. The phrasing was much more general. You're not doing the job. You're not qualified to do the job. You've been over-promoted, but look, you're there in the job now. So let's do everything we can to make it work. But if we're going to make it work, make you successful in this job, because you're meant to do a job and get paid for it, then you need to lift your performance, you need to raise your performance, lift your game, you need to put work into this and that area and so on. So I'd go through, but they all hated that. There wasn't a single woman that I recall that was prepared to tolerate that or put up with it even for a second. And they would always go to a default position of, you're only saying this because you hate me. That was always the default. It didn't matter, what it was. It didn't matter how mild or serious the criticism was. Even if you pointed out, look, you're going to think this is criticism, but it's telling you where you need to lift your game. But they wouldn't see it that way. They'd instantly go to, you hate me. That's why you're doing this. And the only way you can prove you don't hate me is by not evaluating me. You cannot evaluate me on a merit system, because if you do, it means you hate me. This type of thing. And so it was nigh impossible to do an evaluation without it turning into a dramatic incident. Now, this was before the days of lawfare and you tried to rape me, and it was before those days. So not that was to come not long afterwards. But fortunately, I wasn't really caught up too much in that. But the issue here was that they refused to accept accountability and responsibility. Now, say a job would come up internally where it was to be on a committee for something. The women in the company would flock to the fucking committee because nobody was personally responsible. Nobody, no one, there was no merit, there was no pass or fail. So wherever a merit, independent, impartial merit system or pass or fail came in, then the women were terrified of it, but they wanted the pay and the glory of a senior role, but not the responsibility, not the accountability, not the performance requirements. And this is something that on that basis alone, I determined that women weren't suited. Not every single one, by the way, there were exceptions, that women weren't suited in the main for those roles. Now, if a woman had worked her way up from the shop floor, had produced and performed and created, I had no problem with that. I was fine with that. But parachuting underqualified, over-promoted, affirmative action women into roles, it never worked because they were never up to the job and were at the same time refusing to accept any accountability, whether it be instructions they were given or through the employee performance evaluation system. And similarly, I'd get women coming to me quietly, knocking on my door and can I talk to you for a minute? Yeah. And if they had a boss, a man, and they would say, well, Jimmy Jack's giving me a tough evaluation. I said, okay, well, have you got your evaluation there? Let's have a look at it. All right, well, what in particular? I just don't like the way he says I have to try harder. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with trying harder? Why you what's? I think Jimmy Jack doesn't like me. That's no. Jimmy Jack has never said a negative word about you. So now when it comes to personal entanglements, I tried to stay aloof from all the people that reported to me because I didn't want to get chummy with somebody and then cut them too much slack if they weren't doing their job, or if I didn't like somebody to be overzealous in the evaluation or process. So I tried to stay aloof. So I was very, very determined on this, to not have personal relationships with anybody in the company. With the board of directors and my boss, the CEO, whatever at the time, that was unavoidable. You had to have a relationship there. But with subordinates reporting to me, I didn't want to be corrupted, if you will, by having personal relationships with people. Inevitably, there are some people you like and don't like. That's going to happen. So I try to avoid that so I could be impartial when it came to giving instructions, giving promotions, giving rewards, and so on. Other things that women would do, they would come to me and say, look, I want that job that's just come up in the such and such department. Well, why do you want that job? Oh, I don't know. It's kind of sexy. It's a cool job. It's prestigious, and I get to go around the party circuit bragging about I got a promotion. The position pays well, and I need more money to fund my my careless spending habits. And you'd get that sort of justification. Well, that's not really a justification. And can you do a better job than the previous incumbent? Or Billy Bob's looking, is interested in that job. Can you do a better job than Billy? Billy Bob's pretty well qualified. Well, I'm a people person. This is the girls would say, or the women would say. I'm a people person, so I can bring a special understanding to the position that it can't be described or identified, or it can't be itemized. It's just something special. A woman's touch I can bring to Well, how's that going to improve that department or that section? Tell me how. Oh, well, and if you don't give me the job, it's because you don't like. It's because you hate me. That was often they would come out. It's not that you don't. Sometimes they'd say, "Oh, you're only doing this because you don't like me." But just as often, if not more often, they'd say, "Well, the reason you're not giving me this job is because you hate me. You hate me." And they would talk like little schoolgirls, justifying things, or they'd cry in the middle of the evaluation. And I would just stare blank. Look, this is not going to change anything. You're still going to get the same evaluation. And Billie Jean, you're not doing your job. So that's the bottom line here. You need to do it. Now, in some cases, it's obvious. The women would come in late and they'd be, they goof off for long lunches. There'd be those sorts of things. But for the most part, and that did happen actually more frequently, you'd think. But for the most part, they just weren't up to it. They were terrified of making decisions because making a decision meant they had to take responsibility. And they were terrified of the thought that it may fail or not work out, or they'd fuck something up. So the best thing to do was to not do anything. That was one of the big problems. The other thing was that they would go and do something, but it was a very ill-advised move. They could have easily got advice from around them, come to me or come to their direct boss and got some guidance on. But instead, they go off on an obviously very risky and dangerous course, and they'd fuck it up. But they would then say, "Oh, well, you don't. If a man does that, he's praised. But if I do it, you tell me that I." And so they try and say that, "Oh, you're only saying that because if I had a penis, you'd be fine with it," and that sort of stuff. Hey, I'm not putting up with that even for a minute. You're fucked up. You haven't done your job. This type of thing. But again, this is in the pre-lawsuit days. So when we look at the dynamics here that are feeding into this, there are armies of affirmative action people that aren't qualified to sweep the floor, let alone be engineers and scientists, and they're out there now doing fucking everything up. They're underperforming and so on and so forth. Government grants are being given to the companies are forced to hire affirmative action people, and the job just isn't getting done, or it's being done badly. These people get performance evaluations they don't like. They can't take any criticism whatsoever. They're so insanely insecure. They've been trained that everything's a patriarchy and a misogyny thing. And so they rush straight for the lawyers as soon as something happens that they don't like. And this is creating but it's actually having a reverse effect in the sense that a lot of companies now must be thinking to themselves, why would we hire women? Now it's more than that. It's more than that. Why would you hire pink-haired, tattoo-covered women with lots of body piercing? I mean, why would you do it? And yet these people are being hired as supposedly kick-ass rocket scientists, and you'd look at them and go, "What? They're not a fucking. They're it's so obviously they're so obviously an affirmative action, a creature of affirmative action, that why would you hire them? There are women out there who are are hardworking, who do take responsibility, but they don't need the affirmative action programs. So it's the affirmative action creatures that are creating the problem, and it's a huge problem. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.